Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
GOP lawmaker says counting black people as 3/5 of a human was justified. I've sat here praying for about 5 to 10 minutes about how I'm going to address this issue, Tennessee State Rep Justin Lafferty said. A Tennessee lawmaker thinks the 3/5 compromise, an article of the Constitution that counted enslaved people as 60% of a human being, has been unfairly maligned. On Tuesday morning, Tennessee lawmakers debated yet another iteration of a bill to ban critical race theory from the state's public school curriculum. Versions of such legislation have cropped up around the country recently as Republicans react to a push to make schools more inclusive by educating students about systemic racism. Last week, Idaho Governor Brad Little signed one such ban into law. Tennessee's version of the bill would, among other things, prohibit educators from teaching that this state or the United States is fundamentally or irredeemably racist or sexist. Something that isn't happening now. It would also bar teachers from promoting division between classes or races, a nebulous concept that critics say is designed to shut down discussions about the role of race and racism in American history. How about classism? How about capitalism? Okay, Vice. I've sat here praying for about 5 to 10 minutes about how I'm going to address this issue. Rep. Justin Lafferty of Knoxville started his remarks on the floor. Apparently, he didn't pray hard enough because it got much worse from there. Okay, you ready?
The 3/5 compromise was a direct effort to ensure that southern states never got the population necessary to continue the practice of slavery everywhere else in the country. What does that mean? Appropriation based on population. That's how we pick. Everybody in here knows we've got 9 state representatives. By limiting the number of population in the count, they specifically limited the number of representatives that would be available in the slaveholding states, and they did it for the purpose of ending slavery, well before Abraham Lincoln, well before a Civil War. Do we talk about that? I don't hear that anywhere in this conversation across the country. I don't know how we've gotten here. I don't know what we do about it, but talking about changing our history, changing's not the right word. Talking about incorporating another view of history while ignoring the very writings that we have access to is no way to go about it.
The Chick-fil-A bag. I didn't even notice. That's not what the 3/5 compromise was. Southern states wanted to have more representatives in Congress. They wanted full representation for their slaves so that they would have more power. And people in the North said, you can't have somebody as a slave and then count them for representation. That's absurd. And they said, nah, how about this? You count 60% of a black person as a person, so we get extra power. And that's what our system was set up to do. Our system was set up to give slave owners more power by virtue of owning slaves. Notice that the just position wasn't even on the table, which was abolish all slavery and give universal emancipation and universal suffrage to all human beings in America. That wasn't even on the table. The question was, do we say that black people aren't people at all, in which case Southern slave power is decreased, or do we pretend they're 60% of a person to increase Southern slave power? So when somebody says America is fundamentally and was founded on racist assumptions, that includes everyone in the founding. Those that were arguing for the slaves not to count, and those that were arguing for the slaves to fully count for the purpose of increasing slaveholder power. And the 60% compromise makes sense, and it's obvious for everybody when you hear it. Wow, black people were considered 60% of a person. That's fucking racist, because it is. And none of the founders, I mean, there was a couple of them who wanted to abolish slavery, but none of that wasn't on the table for that. So when you teach the reality, Justin Lafferty doesn't want you to teach the reality. He wants you to be taught that black people, it was just for black people to be held in bondage. That's what he wants to tell you, because that's what he has to tell you in order to justify his disgusting worldview. Well-written thread on this exactly. The 3/5 compromise wasn't a compromise about the rights of enslaved people. Enslaved people were considered 0/5 of a person under it, not 3. It was about how much extra power slave owners would be given compared to other white people. Under the 3/5 compromise, a white person in states where slavery was legal counted as more of a person for the purposes of representation than a white person in a state where it was illegal. Every once in a while, one of my students will say slaves only counted as 3/5 of a person, and I'll stop the class dead and say, that's not true. The truth is actually much worse than that. And then we go on from there. It's just so revealing as to what was going on in this country was at the founding, that the big representation debate around slavery ultimately centered on how much being a slaveholder entitled you to disenfranchise other white people. Not whether, but how much. It's like the fact that for decades it was legal in the United States for slave owners to sell their own children, and a not insignificant number of them did just that. We are so far away from an actual national reckoning with this country's past. Someone might mention saying that this was really about achieving balance between the regions, but that's exactly the point. You don't get balance and representation by disenfranchising some people and super-enfranchising others because of their ideologies. The 3/5 compromise granted political power to slaveholders in the face of that fact that they were an electoral minority, even among white men. It gave them political power even when they were outvoted, and at the expense of those that outvoted them. And the effect of that compromise was to disenfranchise white men who didn't own slaves, in service of perpetuating the institution of slavery and all its horrors. It was a compromise between people who wanted to own other people as property, who were given more power than could be justified in an electoral democracy, and the people who didn't, given less, on the backs of people who were owned as property, given none. There are people in the United States who believe that they, by virtue of their ideology, deserve more power, more votes, more representation than their opponents. And there are people who believe that all Americans should have the vote and that all votes should be counted equally. The divide is stark, and it has its roots deep in the ugly history of the country. This thread is incredible, and to this day, people like Pepe La D believe that they should have more votes than you because of their ideology. Did you know that? Actually good thread. Here in Virginia, I had an old lady tell me that slavery wasn't that bad and that some slave owners treated their slaves like family. I was dumbfounded. I had no response to that level of ignorance. My suggestion, if you're ever in those kind of conversations, is you say, hey, let's listen to some slave narratives. During the New Deal, FDR had, because there were slaves alive during the New Deal, FDR had a bunch of oral testimonies from former slaves. They're called slave narratives. There's also these books. Yeah, there they are. The WP, here it's called the Slave Narrative Collection. Slave narratives, a folk history of slavery in the United States, often referred to as the WPA Slave Narrative Collection, was a compilation of histories by former slaves undertaken by the Federal Writers Project of the Works Progress Administration from 1936 to 1938. This is what conservatives love to erase. Conservatives wanted this history to be erased, but FDR paid writers to go around and write it down. So you can't deny what slavery was really like. The collections as works of the U.S. federal government are in the public domain. The collection has been digitized and is available online. In addition, excerpts have been published by various publishers as printed books or on the internet. The total collection contains more than 10,000 typed pages, representing more than 2,000 interviews. The Library of Congress also has a digitized collection of recordings that were sometimes made during these interviews. Compiled as it was primarily by white interviewers, it does not represent an entirely unbiased view. John Blasingame, an influential historian of slavery, has said that the collection can present a simplistic and distorted view of the plantation that is too positive. All historical evidence has to be measured against a minimum standard of truth that would allow historians to use the property. Historians have not to date applied this stipulation to the slave narratives. Other historians worry that individuals interviewed may have modified their accounts in other ways because of being interviewed by whites. Really interesting shit. The narratives also served as a basis for the 2003 HBO documentary Unchained Memories, readings from slave narratives. These people just need to come out and say, I liked it when we owned people. A short clip from the documentary.
80 years between the Civil War and World War II, black Southerners were no longer slaves, but they were not yet free.
what happened.
Remember when Pepe Le Pew said history doesn't matter? It reminds me of how Sam Harris argued that history is irrelevant in his debate with Ezra Klein on race and IQ. Because they say that shit because they don't know anything and they can't debate from history. They have to try to argue from some sort of principle that they invented in their head.
That period of time was so much more terrible than anything most Americans recognize or understand today.
In one of the most shameful chapters of American history, generations of black Southerners were forced to labor against their will.
Free black people could be just picked up and put in jail. The sheriff department could sell people to corporations and coal mines.
He locked me up for 3 days. And after that, he said, if I don't go to work, he'll put me in the river down there.
People's lives were truly stolen from them. Their freedom was taken away.
All the southern states use the criminal justice system to put African Americans back into a position as close to slavery as they possibly could.
These were real people who were deemed to be of no value. Maybe now, through the telling of this history, these individuals can receive some measure of justice.
Speaking of slave narratives, Mike, please check out freedomonthemove.org. It's a Cornell Uni crowdsourced project to gather slave narratives and provide indexable metadata. Takes only a few minutes to contribute. Super easy. Our community could help out. Oh, that's a good idea, Sarah Mack. We do politics here every morning starting at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. You can watch us here on Twitch. We're the morning guy. The morning politics guy. Politics Frogs in every single day, same time, 10 a.m., day in, day out, and we carry you through your morning and early afternoon politics needs. And if you need more, Mike from PA, we have a YouTube channel. We talked about suburbs, the My Pillow guy, Ted Cruz. We talked about DSA. Amazing. Making fun of Tim Pool. Amazing. Look at all of these amazing videos. Get in there, watch them. We have me on Twitter. You gotta follow me on Twitter, chat. I'm at 20,614 subs. That means I got like 40 followers on Twitter in the last day. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. Go follow us on Twitter. And of course, join the Discord, where we have an incredible community of left-wing streamers. We have left-wing community. We talk about the stream. We talk about politics. There's gaming content. It's a really awesome, supportive place. Direct action, mutual aid, and you can just let off some steam. And also, you can help produce the show. One of the things I do is I look at the links that are put into the news content suggestions chat room on the Discord. Join the Discord. Come hang out. And maybe what you want me to talk about will be part of the next show.